Well, welcome to the program. This is Jeanne Ives, and this is The Real Story. And I've got a treat for you today. On the phone with me is Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes is an Ohio Democrat. And believe it or not, he's held office as one of the only Democrats in a very Republican county. And he's been a lifelong Democrat. But he's a very conservative Democrat. So I know Dusty because I know Dusty's son, Brian, who has helped me in numerous ways on doing my reveilles that you often hear on WIND on Tuesday morning. So Brian is there to help technically make sure that sounds terrific, and he does a great job. And he introduced me to his father, Dusty, who he's very proud of. And I wanted to get Dusty on this podcast for a number of reasons, but I think his perspective, his long-term perspective about being a long-term Democrat and seeing where that party has gone and what does that mean for the upcoming election in November. So we're going to have a long conversation, but I wanted to start this segment with a commentary that was written by a man named Howard Wilkinson, and he knows Dusty fairly well. And he writes, Dusty Rhodes on ideological purity, Trump, and running for a 9th term. As I read this article, you'll also get to know a little bit more about Dusty and his background. So the article starts out, you could make a pretty good argument that both the Ohio Republican Party and the Hamilton County Democratic Party are more interested in booting people out than letting people in. First, there was the Ohio Republican Party's Executive Committee, which held a Zoom meeting for the purpose of censoring Anthony Gonzalez, the GOP congressman from the Cleveland suburb of Rocky River, for the unpardonable sin of being one of 10 U.S. House members to vote to impeach Donald Trump as he was leaving office. Then, last Saturday, the Hamilton County Democratic Party's Executive Committee, as if they were in some kind of competition with the Ohio GOP for the dumbest act of the year, held its own Zoom meeting. And on the agenda was a motion to put the party on record as saying that Hamilton County Auditor Dusty Rhodes, who has held that office for nearly 32 years, is not in good standing with the Democratic Party. Why? Because he tweets at a rate only slightly behind Donald Trump as president, and almost all of it is conservative, right-wing stuff that does not sit well with the progressives of the Hamilton County Democratic Party. Rhodes was not on Zoom for the meeting and has been thumbing his nose at the party ever since. I talked to him Tuesday for the first time in a long time. Truth be told, he and I had some kind of Twitter fight a year or so ago, and we stopped communicating. I don't even remember what it was about. The one thing I learned right off the bat in talking to Rhodes was that he is completely unapologetic about anything he has said or done to upset the Democratic Party's progressive wing. They are demanding ideological purity, and they are not going to get it from me, said Rhodes. I love that comment. I was always swimming against the tide. I was elected auditor when the Republicans ran everything in Hamilton County government. Rhodes said, I opened up the door for Democrats in county government. Now they want to say I'm not in good standing. Fine. Rhodes has done a lot of things that infuriate the party leadership, from tweets praising Donald Trump to endorsing Republican Bruce Hoffbauer for sheriff last year over Charmaine McGuffey. Hoffbauer lost, by the way. Then last summer, there was this tweet from Rhodes, which I think my listening audience is going to find fascinating, which really sent the party leadership over the edge. It came after Black Lives Matter was painted by activists on Elm Street in front of City Hall. Just wondering when they are going to paint Black Lives Matter on Auburn Avenue, in front of that building where they terminate black lives and white ones too almost every day of the week. Rhodes, a pro-life Catholic, was talking about the Planned Parenthood clinic on Auburn Avenue. He has a low opinion of Black Lives Matter movement in general and doesn't keep it a secret. It's obvious. It's an obvious con by a bunch of Marxist grifters, Rhodes told me. I'm not going to sit still and go along with it. The article goes on, but this also gives you a little bit more background about my guest. My guest here online with me, Dusty Rhodes. He grew up in Syracuse, New York, in a family who had been Democratic for decades. But being a Democrat in upstate New York in Rhodes' youth bears little resemblance to the Democrat of the 21st century. It was a more conservative, blue-collar type of Democratic Party made up of people like his father, a milkman, and a proud union member, a Harry Truman Democrat. Dusty Rhodes got into the radio business, so this is a little bit intimidating to me. Just a little pause here, because I am dealing with a very professional speaker, and here I am just putting my podcast together. So I'm sure there's a lot of critique that he could give me and make me better. But anyway, Dusty Rhodes got into the radio business as a young man and ended up in Cincinnati as a disc jockey for WSAI, then the highest rated top 40 station in the city. Within a few years, he was a household name in Cincinnati, one of WSAI good guys who in 1964 brought the Beatles to Cincinnati. That's a huge achievement. Before he was elected county auditor, he spent 21 years as a Delhi Township trustee, a conservative Democrat elected in a township that was quickly turning Republican. In 1990, he became the first Democrat to be elected to a county office in 2 decades and has been elected to 8 four-year terms. In 2002 and in 2006, the Hamilton County Republican Party didn't even bother to run anyone against him. There was no point. Next year, the office is up for election again. Clearly, the Hamilton County Democratic Party is in no mood to run Rhodes again. Rhodes said he hasn't made up his mind on whether he will run for a 9th term, this time as an independent. He said he doesn't see himself as a Republican candidate. He says the Republicans have never even talked to me about switching parties. So that's your introduction to my guest. I think it's fascinating, Dusty, to be talking to you at this time because the polarization of both parties has really done quite a deal on America. But now, even more so, the Democratic Party is unhinged from reality. What do you have to say
Jeanne,
with that?
Jeanne, it's great to be with you. Thank you very much for that. Your kind words. You sound great, as by the way, in my professional opinion. But it's a shame. What's happened is the Democrats really romped and stomped here in the 2020 election. The suburban housewives in the northern part of the county switched their allegiance because they didn't like Trump and gave the Democrats some leeway and some wins they ordinarily wouldn't have gotten. It'll be interesting this year if it snaps back, and I'm thinking it will to some degree, but it's emboldened a bunch of activists in the party who demand that you toe the line on these issues. And quite frankly, I'm not looking to the Democratic Party to save my immortal soul. That's the job of my church. And I'm not going to switch on something as basic as that. The thing is appalling to me is the Democrats, Democratic Catholics specifically, who have turned tail on the church. And I honor the Archbishop of San Francisco that slammed the door on Pelosi. It's about time. It's unfortunate there aren't many of them, but they've got nobody to blame but themselves for letting this go on year after year, and Democrats claiming to be Catholics and not supporting the teaching of the church. That's pretty bad in my estimation.
Well, we have Cardinal Cupich here in the Chicago area who seems to be quite cozy with our Democrat Governor J.B. Pritzker, and he just basically went along with the entire shutdown and the closing off of schools. He even let him run roughshod over the Catholic schools, and the Catholic schools have a huge following. He could have easily pushed back and been a champion for everybody, every school child, every parent, and instead he just fell in with the Democrat leadership here in the state. So it's very unfortunate to see them also doing that, not even on core Catholic policies, but just on general governance issues of liberty and freedom. And he just let them close down the churches, close down everything. It's shameful, in my opinion.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. These bishops that won't speak up are part of the problem and contributing to the cultural decline of the country. And the politicians are going along with it. I mean, the stuff they are saying and supporting, contrary to common sense, at its most primitive level, is amazing to me. The stuff they're allowing and saying, and this transgender thing is another thing that's wildly out of line. I mean, nobody, and they frame it in such a way that if you say anything, you're anti this group. And I don't buy that. I get tremendous support from the African-American community, and I opened this office up when I was elected in 1990 we had 4 out of 200 employees that were African American. So something was going on. By the way, today we have 80 employees. We reduced it through attrition, but we opened up to all the community, and we didn't do it by hiring a $100,000 a year diversity consultant. I simply put ads in the African American weekly newspaper, job openings, and we sent people in here, and people came in, and they were judged on their ability. And we got some wonderful employees, and it shook out to about 20% minority makeup, which reflects the community today. But we didn't do it with marching around and hollering, and we quietly did it in an organized, sensible way, and without wasting taxpayers' money to do it. That's one thing that drives me nuts. This diversity inclusion thing is just ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous.
Well, you took it a step further, and I'm reading from the Cincinnati The Enquirer, basically published your opinion piece, Keep Property Appraisal Process Free of Race and Politics. So you essentially are asserting that the way that they were grading some of the property actually was racist in its tone and had nothing to do with race whatsoever, and it kept property values down. Am I getting that right?
Well, what they were trying to do, the University of Chicago conducted a study some years back, and I don't know precisely what's going on in Cook County, but it was obvious the lower income neighborhoods were being assessed higher than the higher income neighborhoods. There.
Oh, yes, that was happening. Yes, that definitely happened in Cook County. I covered that extensively. The disparity was that the south suburbs, the black communities, really they were overassessed by 10%, and the richer communities were underassessed by 10%. This is all the ability of people who have access to getting their houses reappraised, access to lawyers who can dispute their property tax values, and it's completely absolutely that was 100% racist. But I'm talking here about apparently the Franklin County. Contended
Franklin County,
the Kerwin
that's
Institute,
a Soros-funded institute at Ohio State.
Okay, the Kerwin Institute.
Study.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, and the study was bogus from the get-go, because if we were under-assessing any area or over-assessing any area, the state tax commissioner has to approve our appraisals. That's the first thing. And if we're off the sales ratios, we get hammered, and they tell us to change it. We have never been challenged on ours. But even more strange, the previous Franklin County auditor was an African-American man for 8 years. Now, to suggest that he is rigging the appraisals to hurt minority neighborhoods is insane, notwithstanding the fact that we have no record of the race of the owners. Now, some neighborhoods are obviously more a minority than others, but the strangest thing about Hamilton County, the University of Chicago study called us the best large county in the state.
Wow.
And the local activists said, well, Dusty is doing this and raising the values, and they picked one community where they said I was raising the values, and then in the next sentence they said, but the overall property value has declined 57% in the last 10 years. And I said, well, which is it? And they, of course, don't answer. I mean, they never answer when you nail them.
So what's been the response, though? I mean, so here you are. You take on, obviously, you're sticking up for black babies by pointing out the fact that Planned Parenthood, does a lot of abortions. A lot of the kids don't even make it. I think they have more babies in New York City that die via black babies die via abortion than are actually born. So you've got this, Margaret Sanger was famously, everybody knows that she was a racist, absolutely. So she essentially started Planned Parenthood to deplete the African race. So I mean,
Yeah.
and you point this out, and the liberals' heads explode in your
Yeah,
own
right. That's
party, and you're the one who is bringing people to the party and gaining votes and getting a seat as a Democratic elected official. So was there anybody on your side, or were you one man standing alone against this party?
Well, a bunch of people that don't want to rock the boat
Oh, yes.
have privately told me that they're with me, but I'm not running again anyhow. So that doesn't matter. But the interesting thing is, we had a ward chairman or a party chairman here that kept these people at bay for 25 years, including everybody in, but the crazies, they kept at bay. And when he left, the roof caved in. And that's the problem with the party here. But it's a shame, really, because you need two good parties. And one party shouldn't have dominance completely, like Cook County in Illinois. You can see that what that leads to. And Hamilton County was like that till we broke it up. But the thing I did, I came in here and I cut the staff from 200 to 80 employees through attrition, and increased the minority representation, paid a good wage, and gave $50 million back to the schools and local governments that I could have spent over the years in real estate fund contributions. We take a little bit of the tax payments to operate our office, and that's the real estate fund that is solely up to me to spend any legal way. The tax commissioner has to approve it, but I could have spent every nickel. And I gave back $50 million total to the local governments and schools. So I'm doing the kind of thing that, well, you'd do if you were sitting here, or any taxpayer would do, and that's not good enough for the Democratic Party if you're not for open borders and rampant killing of babies and everything else that they support. And it's discouraging, to say the least.
Yeah, no, it's discouraging all around, because I often tell people I don't really believe that good policy is red or blue. It's just good policy. It makes sense. It conserves tax dollars. It leads to financial security. It leads to personal security. It leads to national security. It leads to, all of this stuff that everybody should want. I mean, there's only going to be a few fringes that really want you to go all in with some really, the Green New Deal, for example, which I think is a bunch of garbage. But I mean, there's only some people who think that personally that you can run a modern economy just on the wind and the solar. You can't. They don't have. You just literally cannot. But everybody else, for the most part, guess what? They want the same thing, and they're feeling the same effects of a Biden administration, which is unhinged from reality. But so why such a divide? I mean, I think it's because, one, I don't think the media does its job in fairly reporting everything, and then I think that people's lives are so busy that they just don't pay attention to the details. And they are tribal in their voting rather than looking at what's really best overall for themselves and the country.
Well,
I don't know how to get past it.
Well, the media is a prime offender, and if the greatest thing President Trump did, in my estimation, is call them out for what they are. Bernie Goldberg wrote a book in the early 90s called Bias that set the tone and exposed what they were up to. And I turned off CBS News in 1987 when Dan Rather was doing it. Oh, we used to watch it every night. And I looked at my wife one night in 87 or 88 and said, I'm through. I'm not putting up with this anymore, because it was so obvious that it was slanted. And I'll give you a great example. The news writers, even the local news writers, are referring to Trump's claims about the election of 2020 as Trump's lies. Okay, that's your opinion. Maybe they are, but it's not up to you to get it into a news story, and I could never use it in a news story when I was on the air. Are they talking about Biden's lies, about Putin's gas tax hike? Are they talking about Stacey Abrams' lies? Are they talking about Hillary's lies about the 2016 election? No, they're not. And they had it in for this guy from the start, and that infuriated me. I mean, I was a Democrat, and I was looking at this, and they don't cut the guy any slack. 90% of the coverage is negative, and his accomplishments are buried in the newspaper. And I think people are paying attention now when they see the gas pumps and the groceries and all the rest. And I think they realize what they had and what they gave up. And I'm thinking that 2024 was going to be a come-to-Jesus election.
So do you think we'll see a Reagan-Mondale type year? 49 states for, the Republican and 1 for the Democrats, or?
Yeah, obviously. I mean, I don't know how it can go any other way.
Even when you look at the electoral vote, I mean, the actual vote, Reagan in that year, and I looked it up, 58.8% of the vote, Mondale 40.6% of the vote. So, I mean, you're still going to have 40% of the people, and I actually say this all the time, look, I'm not talking to the 40% of the people. I'm willing to win ugly, 50% plus 1, to get the right policies in place, because, and it's unfortunate, I don't see how anybody thinks that the current economic conditions are helping anybody.
Right.
I mean, okay, who's the misogynist now? I mean, Joe Biden, right. I'm sorry, but, women can't get tampons? Is this a war on women?
Right.
It's nuts. It's nuts in this day and age to have these types of supply chain problems, and it's coming from them.
Incredible. And my complaint with the Republicans is they're too pussyfooting and timid when they get back in power. Mm-hmm. And Rush Limbaugh called them out when they took control of Congress and said, "Don't worry about being liked by the Washington establishment, because you're never going to be liked, and don't cater them." But there's still Republicans up there that are not doing what they should and worried about a few kind words from the Washington Post to the New York Times instead of doing what's right.
Well, listen, I've had my own fights with my own party here as a Republican. So I've done the same thing. I've actually supported some Democrats, and I'll be supporting Paul Vallis as a Democrat running for mayor of Chicago next year. So, and he's a great guy, and we absolutely agree on policy. I've had him on my podcast. So I try to look past party when it makes sense as well. Now, control of Congress is really important. You cannot, right. You have to wrest it from them. You can't have Schumer and Pelosi in charge. So sometimes you've got to make that vote for Congress for particular reasons that way. But when you can, find a good Democrat, I'm happy to look at it. But the party has really shifted from your time being a Truman Democrat, and I don't know if that serves the country well.
I don't think so. They're letting a small minority of the party take over. They're letting the George Soros people in there and pushing the party to the left. Biden is I don't know what he is, but he's not calling the shots, that's for sure. There's somebody controlling him. He's saying and doing stupid things and getting away with it because the media has covered for him for 50 years. And so he's going as far as he can. If President Trump did half the things Biden has done, they'd be hanging him. It's awful. And the media, of course, overall is losing with the American people. They don't see it or they don't care, but I think the bottom line is the economy is going to drive this home in a big, big way. And as far as I'm concerned, thank God for Fox News and the few people that are reporting candidly.
Yeah. So Dusty, you're, 81? Is that correct?
82.
82
now.
Okay. So you had a long radio career, so you were obviously watching for many years what was happening politically, reporting on it. You're very informed. You held elected office. You've seen a lot. So what worries you now for America? What are your concerns?
Well, the decline of the culture, the decline of the church going in the country. You've got to have a strong religious base. I think religion has kept us going through the dark ages.
Right, the
civilization.
biggest number of the biggest when people are told to list, what religious affiliation do you have? Now, I believe the biggest plurality is nuns. So
Yeah,
they have no religious
that's a shame.
affiliation. I think that's terrible.
Yeah, that's a big problem because you've got to have some kind of moral compass to keep you online, and we've lost it in so many ways. That's the big problem I see for the country, and I'm hopeful it'll snap back as more and more people realize what's happening. The mainline Protestant churches have totally collapsed, and the Catholics are not far behind, and they're not standing up for anything. And if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for everything. That's the point. And I think that's the problem. The culture has got to be straightened out. The kids are growing up without fathers, no respect for life, no respect for themselves, no respect for the community. That's what's causing our problem, and exacerbated perhaps by the Great Society. But when you're sending people checks for doing nothing, you're on the road to disaster. It's got to change, and I hope that Biden is so bad that everybody recognizes it, and I think it's getting to that point. And that I think that I'm hopeful Trump runs again. I'm hopeful he wins again. I don't like everything he does or says or the way he acts sometimes, but by God, he gets the job done, and that's important.
No, you're absolutely right. So another question I wanted to pose to you is, our children right now have at their fingertips a wealth of knowledge if they want to access it because of the explosion of technology and the ability to bring things. And I feel like technology is just like money. It's not good or bad. It depends on how you use it. It can open up the world to people that have no capability to visit far-off places or learn about all sorts of information. It is phenomenal how much we can pack into a little device, how much knowledge. I also worry, though, that they may not be actually as knowledgeable as previous generations. This is I think we have a society of children that maybe they didn't grow up building their own house. I mean, side by side with their father, like my husband did. Maybe they didn't grow up fixing their own things in their house, for example, having to learn basic skills to that degree. And I feel that there's, or a lot of kids don't know how to hunt. A lot of them don't garden, for example. It used to be that everybody had a garden. It wasn't just, the rare thing on the street. Everybody did. And everybody can, there was just a lot of information about where things came from, how it was produced, what it took to make it, and we've lost that. And in doing so, we've lost. We have a whole generation that is absolutely. There's no delayed gratification. Everything is very convenient to them. And they don't understand long-term sacrifice. And I think that is also troubling for
I
the
agree.
future.
I couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely right. The kids don't read. They're not being taught reading and writing and arithmetic and the basics of civilization and history. They're being taken to drag shows by the teachers, and that's awful. That's awful. Not only are we condemning these kids to a life of tragedy, but they're hurting society on the whole, and that's a problem.
Here's just a basic example. I was looking at the agenda for our school board meeting, and right there on the agenda is the purchase of Chromebooks for kindergartners. Like, what the hell?
Wow.
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
I mean, I have a problem with that. I don't. It's. I'm not against technology. I'm against technology for kindergarten, which should be honestly, it still should not be full day. That's daycare. It should be a day and a half. But we're just turning our children over to people, to a sort of an intelligentsia class, and I don't think it serves us well.
You couldn't be more right. That's the problem. When we've got to fight back, and we've got to organize, and we've got to stand up for what we believe in, and rally the troops. I think most people, Americans, want this, and I think it's going to happen. But it's going to take a lot of work.
Well, Dusty, listen, I know that you're going to retire, and now you are an independent, and I can't tell you how much I've appreciated reading all of the articles that you've personally put out yourself. You're a prolific writer. You're actually somebody who is increasing the conversation in the knowledge base of people that in your county, and I don't know. I hope I hope your party gets a rude awakening. Do you have a prediction here? You're giving up your long-term auditor job. What, 32 years as auditor?
Yeah.
The only Democrat in a Republican county. What's your prediction? Is a Democrat going to win that seat, or will it be a Republican?
I think the Democratic candidate is got her head on straight.
Okay.
She's a state rep, and she's been really effective, and she's really bright, and she'll be the first woman auditor in history in this county if she wins. But overall, I think the Democrats in this county are in pretty bad shape because of the economy, and a good Republican ticket for the other offices that are up. But we'll see. I mean, that remains to be seen. It's a personality thing in some cases, but I think the Democrats are going to get shellacked nationwide this year, and they brought it on themselves.
They certainly do. Well, for the sake of the country, I truly hope that they've learned their lesson, and everybody knows now that politicians make policy. That policy affects your lives. And if you cannot bury your head in the sand, you can't pretend like you're above it all. You can't pretend like it doesn't really matter to you, or that you can be insulated from it, because at some point in your life, your children's life, your business life, it's going to affect you. So citizenship is not a spectator sport. I like to remind people of that. It takes an involved and a knowledgeable citizenry to ensure democracy and the republic for future generations. And so this is 2022 is a huge wake-up call, I think, for the nation, and I hope we see that wake-up call result in a complete ousting of the Democrats and their policies in November. So, I mean, just a pleasure to have you on, Dusty. I really appreciate you coming on my podcast. Any final thoughts or words that you want to share with my audience?
Well, thank you. Keep up the good fight and keep working. And it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I'm going to still be active.
Okay. That's great. Oh, I'm so glad that you're going to stay. You should take up writing, get back on the radio. You've got a voice that needs to be heard.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay. Have a great day. Welcome back to The Real Story with Jeanne Ives. In this segment, I wanted to address what was happening in D.C. about the J6 committee. This is the January 6th committee, the show trial that Nancy Pelosi has put together to basically find out, investigate supposedly what actually happened on January 6th at the Capitol. As many of my listeners probably know, it's a sham. First of all, Pelosi denied Kevin McCarthy's picks, Leader McCarthy's picks for that particular committee. But yet you have Liz Cheney, fake Republican, and Adam Kinzinger, our own in Illinois, fake Republican, sitting on that committee pretending to really investigate what went on. Well, it's very, very troubling what went on because more than anything, what's going to be coming out, I think, very soon is the fact that the FBI was involved in instigating some of the violence that you saw on January 6th. And fortunately, we have senators like Senator Ted Cruz, who is willing to tackle that conversation. And he did so recently in a Senate hearing. We've got a tape that I'm going to have you listen to, and then I want to provide you with some additional background. Go ahead, JP. Let's play that tape.
I want to turn to the FBI. How many FBI agents or confidential informants actively participated in the events of January 6th?
Sir, I'm sure you can appreciate that I can't go into the specifics of sources and methods.
Did any FBI agents or confidential informants actively participate in the events of January 6th? Yes or no?
Sir, I can't answer that.
Did any FBI agents or confidential informants commit crimes of violence on January 6th?
I can't answer that, sir.
Did any FBI agents or FBI informants actively encourage and incite crimes of violence on January 6th?
Sir, I can't answer that.
Ms. Sadburn, who is Ray Epps?
I'm aware of the individual, sir. I don't have the specific background to him.
Well, there are a lot of people who are understandably very concerned about Mr. Epps. On the night of January 5th, 2021, Epps wandered around the crowd that had gathered, and there's video out there of him chanting, "Tomorrow, we need to get into the Capitol, into the Capitol." This was strange behavior, so strange that the crowd began chanting, "Fed, Fed, 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 Fed." Ms. Sandburn, was Ray Epps a Fed?
Sir, I cannot answer that question.
The next day, on January 6th, Mr. Epps is seen whispering to a person, and 5 seconds later, 5 seconds after he's whispering to a person, that same person begins to forcibly tear down the barricades. Did Mr. Epps urge them to tear down the barricades?
Sir, similar to the other answers, I cannot answer that.
Wow. 2 minutes of testimony that every American should listen to and understand that your government is not giving you answers about what really happened on January 6th. It's extremely troubling. And Ted Cruz needs to pursue this, and as does every single senator need to pursue this to the final degree. Final truth. And why is this important? Well, here's also why it's important. Reading from a New York Post article, inside the FBI's infiltration and entrapment of a Michigan militia crew. This is from April 13th, 2022. Because if you don't remember, the short version of the story is that the FBI infiltrated a militia group in Michigan that basically was upset with Governor Whitmer's COVID policies. And they started to instigate a kidnapping of Gretchen Whitmer and followed by a possible murder. They were setting all this up. Reading from the article, this is written by James Bovard, and I'm going to read parts of this because it's very important to what is going on right now. The show trial on January 6th, the show trial that Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, Nancy Pelosi, and the rest of them will not find the truth to. But we have a hint of what may have happened on January 6th. We have a hint of it by looking at what happened in Michigan. The FBI got walloped last week when a Michigan jury concluded that the Bureau had entrapped 2 men accused of plotting to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Those men and others were arrested a few weeks before the 2020 election in a high-profile FBI fabricated case that Joe Biden claimed showed President Trump's tolerance of hate, vengeance, and lawlessness to plots such as this one. But the jury verdict exposes how the feds have created the monsters they parade to vindicate their vast power over Americans. Reading on. Whitmer was denounced at protests and on the Facebook page of the Wolverine Watchman, where angry anti-government bluster poured forth. Facebook chief Mark Zuckerberg testified to Congress in October of 2020 that Facebook had identified the Whitmer kidnap plot as a signal to the FBI about 6 months ago regarding suspicious activity on our platform. But the plot didn't exist at that point. That is until multiple government-paid newcomers joined the group. Stephen Robeson, an FBI informant with a list of felonies and other crimes, organized key events to build the movement. Dave Chappell, another FBI informant who was paid $54,000, became second in command and masterminded the military training for the group, even as he helped the feds wiretape their messages. Though several militia members explicitly opposed kidnapping the governor, Chappell and Robeson helped hatch a ludicrous plot to snatch Whitmer from her vacation home and take her away for trial. FBI operatives took the participants who prattled idiotically about stealing a Black Hawk helicopter for drives near Whitmer's vacation home, which supposedly proved they were going to nab the governor and unleash havoc. It was all a setup. Shortly before that excursion, an FBI agent texted instructions to Chappell. Mission is to kill the governor specifically. There were as many FBI informants and undercover agents as there were purported plotters in this case. The conspiracy began unraveling even before the trial began last March. Robert Trask, the lead FBI agent and the public face of the kidnapping case, was fired after he was arrested for beating his wife during an argument over an orgy that the two had attended at a hotel in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Okay, pause here. That's the FBI agent in charge? I mean, he beats his wife and he's part of an orgy? Oh, good grief. Okay, the New York Times reported that 2 other key FBI agents were sidelined from the case for misconduct, including creating a side hustle with his own cybersecurity firm. Who are these FBI agents? Who are these people? And they're in charge. They're the people that are maybe going to look into red flag laws. Oh, give me a break. They're the people going after school parents who go to their school board meetings. And who are these people? Don't think that it couldn't happen to just anyone. Okay, when the arrests were announced in October 20, a top Justice Department attorney proclaimed that the case showed that our state and federal governments are working together to keep us all safe. But the case actually illustrated how the Supreme Court and federal judges have entitled federal agencies to create the crimes that they claim to thwart. And that's exactly what Ted Cruz was trying to expose in his comments to the FBI, one of the FBI leaders in that clip that you heard. He is directly asking the questions all of us want to know the answer to, which is, were FBI informants involved in the January 6th violence that occurred? Is that what happened? Were they the instigators? Who is Ray Epps? Where is he? How come he's not sitting in a jail for 18 months after this occurred? It's unbelievable that they are getting away with this. We need strong, real people in office that are going to get to the bottom of this. This is a rogue agency that has proven that they have been corrupted for a very long time, including with the Hillary Clinton campaign. Reading more, though, let's go to this event. This is an interesting article. This is from Human Events, and the title of it is "Everything You Were Told of January 6th is a Lie." Very interesting. It is written by, hold on here. It's written by Chris Barron. This came out January 6th of this year. He writes, a year ago today, I was standing a few feet from the stage where President Donald Trump spoke to hundreds of thousands of supporters at the Ellipse in Washington, D.C. I was there handling press for the event on behalf of Women for America First, the organization founded by Amy Kramer, one of the most committed patriots in the country. I left that event just as the president was wrapping up his remarks and walked back to my hotel, just a couple blocks away. Through a sea of smiling, cheering, and excited Trump supporters, I walked into the suite of our hotel and told Amy how happy and honored I was to be a part of such an amazing event. I told her I have been a part of a lot of political events over my 20 plus years in this business, but nothing as powerful or as important as the event today. A mere 30 minutes later, absolutely befuddled by the scenes of violence I was seeing at the Capitol building, I left the hotel, hopped on a metro train out of the city, and headed home. In my wildest, darkest, and most dystopian nightmare, I could never have envisioned how the left and the legacy media would twist and manipulate what happened on January 6th in order to pursue their partisan political agenda. Let's be absolutely clear. Everything they have told you about January 6th is a lie. I can't do justice to a comprehensive list of their lies. I will leave that to the absolute best reporter on the planet when it comes to January 6th, Julie Kelly. He goes on, while I won't attempt to give the complete list of lies, I will run down some of the most egregious ones. Despite thousands of descriptions of the Capitol riot as an insurrection, the truth is that not a single person has been charged with insurrection. Okay. Again, not a single person has been charged with insurrection. He gives the definition. So every time you hear a Democrat politician or a member of the legacy media describe January 6th as an insurrection, it's an absolute lie. Not only was January 6th not an insurrection, there's absolutely no evidence that President Donald Trump or anyone else connected to the Trump White House had anything whatsoever to do with planning of the Capitol riot. Indeed, according to the January 6th committee themselves, their smoking gun consists of proof that President Trump didn't call for the riot to end as quickly as they would have wanted. Let me repeat, the J6 committee hasn't produced one single piece of evidence that proves that the Trump administration had any part of planning the Capitol riots, not one single piece of evidence. So not only have they failed to prove that they have any evidence, the committee has failed to produce a single piece of evidence that proves that Trump's speech at the Ellipse inspired anyone to riot, not a single piece of evidence. What is more probably is what happened is exactly what happened in Michigan. More than likely, you had FBI informants and other agents there trying to perpetrate some sort of violent show so that they could do exactly what they're trying to do, which is essentially ensure that they can put Donald Trump on trial and make sure that he doesn't try to get a second term beginning in 2024. His article went on, though. Most egregiously, the American people have been lied to about who died on January 6th. The truth is only one person died on January 6th, an unarmed female veteran Trump supporter. No police officer died. And the idea that officers who committed suicide 6 months later should somehow be included in the list of victims takes gaslighting to a whole new level. Finally, despite all the efforts of the January 6th committee, efforts that have sought to bankrupt average Americans who committed no crime other than supporting President Trump's, absolutely no effort has been undertaken to determine how many FBI agents and informants participated in the J6 riots. Absolutely no demand has been made to release all of the surveillance videos, and almost no effort has been made to determine who, if anyone, left pipe bombs at the RNC and the DNC. This is going to be another one of the big lies that needs to be dismantled. One more article, I think it's important, and Chris Barron is right. One of the best people, Julie Kelly, is outstanding in covering the J6, everything about J6, including the incarceration of people for misdemeanor crimes that were basically when you had the BLM riots and billions of dollars of damage, and leftists throwing Molotov cocktails at police cars and at police, and they're getting off on light sentences. It's just shameful. The hypocrisy is shameful. But in this one, Mediaite specifically says Bannon. Julie Kelly was recently on Steve Bannon's War Room, and she placed the blame on police for being violent during the Capitol insurrection. in 2021. The article goes on to say the people who were violent on J6 were the police, she said. The D.C. and Capitol Police were throwing flashbangs and dousing protesters with tear gas and using rubber bullets against them outside the building. Those were the violent people on J6. So she says it's all performance, talking about the committee. They're there to destroy the Constitution. And she claimed that U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Matthew Graves, had every reason to bring charges against Trump because they have gotten away with everything to this point. Wait a minute, let me read that. It's all performance, she continued, but it does serve a purpose, as I said, to build up public justification to eventually bring charges against Trump. That's what they want. They want to bring charges against Trump. Last week, the U.S. Attorney for District of Columbia, Matthew Graves, declined to bring criminal contempt charges against former Trump officials Mark Meadows and Dave Scaviano after deciding to do so against Bannon and Peter Navarro. All four are defying congressional subpoenas. So anyway, that's what's going on in this particular instance. I think this is a seminal issue. I think that this deserves a lot more attention, honestly, than even inflation. And I know inflation is everybody's top concern, and it's certainly a concern of mine. But what you're talking about right now is your government working against you, your government instigating riots, your government proven in the Michigan case to have try to come up with plots and ploys so they can entrap other Americans. It's so shameful on every single level. So good job, Senator Cruz, on questioning the FBI, and keep at it. I mean, that's all we can say. We got to have good people in office that will shut this down. It's a threat to everybody. Back with the next segment. Welcome back to The Real Story with Jeanne Ives. In this segment, I've got three little vignettes that I want to discuss with you, three issues. The first of them being COVID-19. It's not a topic that we've paid a lot of attention to lately. Why? Because for most people, COVID is over, and we're never going to wear a mask again, or let these people shut down our economies and close us out of our churches, or leave us stranded while our loved ones die in a hospital room and nobody can be around it. In fact, what's interesting, there's been a number of bills that have been passed locally, at the state level and federally, saying that you have a right to be with a loved one in their time of most need. So that I think is kind of sets the stage for where we're going. But no doubt about it, the Democrats want to keep this going. That's why they're still recommending now that kids take a spit test, that they get tested regularly. They're even thinking about keeping the Test to Stay program in place. This is nonsense. You've had very few COVID deaths from minor children, and yet they cannot let it go. An article in Yahoo News talks about this, saying CPS ends the school year with 22,000 student COVID-19 cases. Meanwhile, the Chicago Teachers Union says safety measures should remain in the fall. So CPS is closing out the school year Tuesday. The district is reporting nearly 22,500 cases among 272,000 students from the first week of school in August through last week. Each case represents an individual report of COVID-19, so a student reinfected with the virus would count as 2 cases. The data does not include CPS charter, contract, and alternative learning students. So who cares? What did that matter? Did it matter at all? It really didn't. So this was supposed to be a recovery year for CPS, the article goes on to say, but that's not the way it unfolded. The district struggled to launch and expand testing and contact tracing initiatives. And so we'll see what happens here. It's tough to say where Chicago will be in its battle with COVID-19 when school resumes August 22nd. In its recently released budget guide for the upcoming year, CPS vowed to still provide voluntary free COVID-19 testing to asymptomatic students and staff. I think this is all nonsense. I think a lot of people think it's nonsense, but they cannot let it go. Meanwhile, what is happening with COVID to begin with? What is really going on when it comes to COVID? Well, this article from WirePoints tells us a lot. And by the way, you can go to wirepoints.org and you can track this as much as they do. They track it daily. And their latest report, and I find this very enlightening, looking back, they have a COVID-19 daily summary, and they talk about new vaccine doses administered. The daily date is 11,464. This is from today's date, June 16th. This is new vaccine doses. Total Illinoisans fully vaccinated, 8,288,000. Percentage of Illinoisans of all ages fully vaccinated, 65.1%. They break it also down by county. Percentage of Illinoisans 65 plus that have at least one dose of vaccine, 95%. 95%. Wow. I'm kind of shocked it's that high, but it is. But at the very bottom of this lengthy chart, they talk about breakthrough deaths. That's the total COVID deaths in the last week are the breakthrough deaths. Okay, and in the last week, it's 92.7% of the deaths last week from COVID were breakthrough deaths. So is that vaccine working? Because a breakthrough death is described. Here we go. The IDPH, the Illinois Department of Public Health, defines a breakthrough as an individual who tests positive for COVID-19 at least 14 days after being fully vaccinated and did not test positive in the previous 45 days. So these are called breakthrough deaths. So they're fully vaccinated, but they died of COVID. Last week, 92% of the COVID deaths were breakthrough deaths. 92% of the people who died from COVID were fully vaxxed. When you look back the last 10 weeks in the state of Illinois, 9 out of those 10 weeks, the breakthrough deaths were higher than the non-breakthrough deaths. And non-breakthrough deaths, oh, by the way, can include people that have maybe had 1 or 2 doses, but maybe didn't have the boosters. Do you see what I'm saying? Why are you having all these breakthrough deaths when these people are fully vaccinated? It's something we deserve answers to. And I highly encourage you to track this because they're not letting COVID die. They're letting it continue on. They're continuing with their policies. I've noticed that in certain grocery stores, it appears that the employees are being forced to mask up again. So the hysteria continues around this virus. And as we know from 2 years of watching this, it affects those who are immunocompromised or have other complications. That is, in general, who is being affected most by this. There's another thing, Ted and John and Mark at WirePoints, who do a great job on all of this information. One of the other things that they track is they track comorbidities. And so, and specifically for Cook County, I think Cook County is one of the few counties that does do this type of tracking. But 91% of COVID-19 deaths in Cook County had comorbidities. 91%. So I think we don't have enough emphasis, quite frankly, and I've said this from the get-go. You've heard me on other podcasts. We are not emphasizing a healthy diet, healthy exercise, healthy weight, all of that. And we know that all of that contributes to being susceptible to COVID and the worst ramifications of that virus. So there's a lot we could do about that. All right, so I just wanted to bring up COVID briefly. Then I want to bring up another item that I wanted to bring up is what is with all the drag queen stuff going on around the country. In this case, the Michigan Attorney General says drag queens make everything better and suggests a drag queen for every school. This comes from a Fox News report. And the way the story reads is Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel reportedly said Wednesday that drag queens make everything better and that there should be a drag queen for every school during an event in Lansing. Nessel, who was the first openly gay person elected to statewide office in Michigan, made the comments during a civil rights conference while speaking out against what she describes as efforts to divide Americans. Craig Mauger of the Detroit News reported this on Twitter. I mean, it's just remarkable that she would say this. The Michigan Attorney General's office, of course, did not immediately respond to Fox News' request for clarification of her comments. Nestle comments come amid heightened national tensions surrounding the presence of drag queens and kings at events marked for children. For example, here's another Fox News article. New York City shelled out more than $200,000 in taxpayer funding in the past 5 years to have drag queens come into classrooms and interact with school children as young as 3. The total includes a $50,000 contribution from New York State through its Council on the Arts, along with $150,000 earmarked from New York City's Department of Education, Cultural Affairs, Youth, and Community Development. It's just unbelievable. But you know what? It's happening close to home as well. Much closer to home, because if you think this is just somewhere far off in Michigan or New York, it's not. This flyer was sent around to a lot of folks, and the City of St. Charles Youth Commission and St. Charles Park District are sponsoring a drag performer for what they call a family-friendly event. It's called Cultural Connections. And according to the flyer, unique experiences for the St. Charles community. Oh, it's free. Hey, you don't have to pay for this. And there it is. It's got the moniker of the St. Charles Park District on it. And the flyer says, family-friendly drag performer, live music, face painting, crafts, balloon arch, photo op, history display, freebies, and more. For more info or to reserve tickets, go to stcharlesparks.org/connections. This happened yesterday, June 15th, celebrating love, friendship, and individuality. Obviously, because it's June and it's Pride Month, this is what they think that they need to do for a community event. Have a drag performer as a family-friendly event. St. Charles, Illinois, so disappointing. So disappointing. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but I am surprised. One other thing that I wanted to discuss is this particular item. This came out of the Red Bud Community Unit School District 132. Now, this school district is in downstate Illinois. And as you know, there's been a lot of discussion about critical race theory, sex ed classes. Of course, we have SB 818 that passed last year, and that mandates that if you're a school district that teaches sex ed, comprehensive sex ed, then you must teach the National Sex Education Standards, which we have covered in depth here before, but they're really very pornographic. They're inappropriate. They just start to teach gender identity beginning in preschool. Some of the standards include teaching masturbation to middle schoolers. There's all sorts of consent videos that are really, really soft porn, and those could be shown to high schoolers. So it's really nefarious stuff. And on top of that, you've had this critical race training that's been going on not only in colleges to particular teachers, but now it's starting to infiltrate down into the classroom, basically teaching people that your background is more important than who you are now. So your racial profile, how you grew up, all of that is more important to your achievement and than who you are as a person right now, and what you're actually is the work that you're putting in for your own grades. So it's pretty damning stuff, very problematic. And Red Bud Community Unit School District, I applaud them. The superintendent there is Jonathan Tallman, and he put out this note to the parents. Addressed to the Red Bud CUSD 132 parents. I'm reaching out to all of you in an effort to settle a couple issues that have been discussed both nationally and locally. The first issue is sexual education. A sex education bill was signed into law earlier this school year by our governor, and I included the press release in the link below. The law requires school districts that teach comprehensive sex ed to adopt the new National Sex Education Standards. Please note, on behalf of our Board of Education, our school district does not teach comprehensive sex education and never has. Therefore, the law that was passed does not apply to our district and will not apply to our district. The national sex education standards are radical, and I think it would come as no surprise that our Board of Education, who are all duly elected officials representing the values of our community, would not even consider adopting them. We do not have a comprehensive sex education program, and there is absolutely no discussion or desire by our Board of Education to adopt one. We do offer a comprehensive health program, which is and has been mandated by our state for decades. It's essentially the same health education that you all had and I had in school. He goes on. The other subject that seems to be discussed is critical race theory, or CRT. Again, on behalf of our Board of Education, we have not and will not be teaching CRT as a unit of instruction or even as a lesson. This is a subject that has snowballed considerably, and it can be challenging to pinpoint exactly what it is. Therefore, you might find a paragraph in a textbook or an excerpt from a discussion of a current events. Different perspectives, as long as it's appropriate, are not bad things, but there is absolutely no CRT being taught in any extensive way whatsoever, and especially not in a way that promotes it. Our Board of Education represents our community's values quite well, and I'd assume that nearly all of you have given them and our administrative team the benefit of the doubt with regard to both of the above controversial topics, but I want to take this moment to put these issues at rest once and for all. And so, I mean, I applaud him for laying it out straight and telling people exactly what he intends to do and to actually not do. So good for him. There are good people in education. I've never doubted that. It is true. And I just would prefer that superintendents and boards of education were more forthright with everybody rather than muddling the issues. Because I've been to a number of board meetings, and I will tell you, there's nothing more muddled than what they intend to do and accept in the classroom, from social emotional learning. What is it? What's going to be acceptable? To discussions about equity, to now some of the biggest concerns about are these lax grading standards that are basically building bad habits in our students. So do not think that the fight at schools is over just because we won the mask issue. It is full on to make sure that they don't impose comprehensive sex ed and national sex education standards on our kids this fall. It's a full-on threat that they are going to continue with equity programs that are actually racist rather than being not racist. And there's a big threat that our kids are getting a dumbed-down education and getting lax grading standards that would create bad habits for them in the future. So the fight continues on education, on elections in this state as well, and on energy. So we're going to be talking about the 3 E's throughout the summer. Stay tuned. Thank you for joining me on my podcast.